All right, so we're back to Judy's crimes. And again, we've decided that, and rightfully so, that Judy can be charged with conspiracy and she can be charged as an accomplice. Again, are the elements satisfied? We know the definition of conspiracy and we know what it means to be an accomplice from the definitions that were presented to you earlier on in the presentation. And whether or not these elements are satisfied is very simple. Judy can be charged with conspiracy because her and her husband conspired to commit this crime. That's obvious from the facts. When Bob came back and said, "I did it," and she said, "I told you not to do it," that right there indicates that at some point they had conspired to commit this crime. It doesn't matter that she later changed her mind. The fact is, at some point, they both got together and conspired to commit this crime. Can Judy be charged as an accomplice? Are the elements satisfied for that charge? Yes. She aided Bob in carrying out the first-degree arson because she purchased the gasoline for him to do so. Now, it was a bit tricky in the problem because she indicated that she told him not to do it. And she said, "Yes, I know I was the one that bought the gasoline, but I told you not to do it. It wasn't a good idea." That is not enough to constitute a withdrawal, because withdrawal, I can't say that word, but withdrawal, the act of withdrawing is a defense in some instances to being charged as an accomplice. But when you withdraw, you can't, it's not enough for you to say, "But I told you not to do it." You have to take express measures to try to prevent this crime from happening, such as taking away the gasoline, notifying law enforcement. Something drastic of that nature has to be done to sustain a defense of withdrawal. Anything other than that won't constitute the defense. So if Judy tries to use the act of withdrawing as a defense, it will fail, because just saying "I told you not to do it" is not enough. Now, we move on to our third candidate, which is Mr. Paul. And the correct answer was forcible and unlawful entry. And the incorrect answer was burglary in the third degree. And here's why. Forcible and unlawful entry: whoever uses force or violence in entering upon or detaining any lands or other property, public or private, or enters another's domicile without the consent of the tenant, is guilty of forcible and unlawful entry. Now, are the elements here satisfied to charge Paul for this crime? Yes. He used force to enter the private property of the individuals who lived in the home. The facts indicated that Paul used a mini crowbar that he had in his bag to break into the door in order to gain access into this private home. Also, he entered another's domicile without the consent of the tenant. So even if the force wasn't used, even if he didn't use the crowbar, he could still be charged with this, because another element that could be established is that he entered the home without the consent of the tenant. And that is exactly what he did. He didn't get the consent of the tenants because they were out of town, and he entered the home. So yes, the elements for forcible and unlawful entry are satisfied. Now we get into burglary in the third degree, and some of you indicated that Paul should be charged with burglary in the third degree, and that is incorrect because, once again, the elements are not satisfied. Burglary in the third degree: whoever with intent to commit an offense therein breaks and enters a dwelling house, building, or structure, or any part thereof is guilty of burglary in the third degree. So in order to charge Paul with this, we would have to show that he had an intent to commit a crime inside the home. Okay, we have the part here where it says breaks and enters a dwelling house. He did that. He broke in with his crowbar. But the intent to commit an offense therein was lacking. And that is because the facts indicate that his sole purpose, the sole reason for him breaking into this home was not to commit an offense therein, but rather it was to seek refuge from the storm. Now, there was a way to be creative with this one. I didn't see anyone do this, but I would have been inclined to give you points if you had indicated that the offense that he intended to commit was trespass. Okay, so do you understand that? Whoever with intent to commit an offense therein, trespass, breaks and enters a dwelling house is guilty of burglary in the third degree. So that is possibly something that I would have been inclined to give points for, but the individuals who selected burglary in the third degree didn't even indicate what the offense was that Paul intended to commit therein. And again, that's because he really didn't intend to commit an offense therein. He just wanted shelter. So this is why burglary in the third degree did not work. It was not the correct option because, again, the elements were not satisfied. Now, disturbance of the peace. The reason I put this up here is because many of you indicated that the neighbors should have been charged with disturbance of the peace, specifically the husband and the wife for their loud arguing, and then the son for playing the very loud music during a party that he had while his parents and his sister had traveled to St. John. Now, I did not include disturbance of the peace as one of the options. So therefore, no one really should have even selected disturbance of the peace because it was not one of the options. However, it's okay that you did because, again, like I said, it shows that, you all are thinking outside of the box and you're being creative, and that is wonderful. However, it was incorrect. And while it may appear on the surface as though arguing really loud and playing loud music would constitute disturbance of the peace, it actually does not. That conduct does not rise to the level of conduct that is required to sustain a charge for criminal disturbance of the peace. That, the arguing, the playing the loud music, that is more along the lines of a public nuisance, not disturbance of the peace. So I've included the definition here for you of disturbance of the peace, which can be found in Title 14, Section 622 of the Virgin Islands Code, and it states, whoever maliciously and willfully disturbs the peace or quiet of any village, town, neighborhood, or person by loud or unusual noise, or by tumultuous offensive conduct, or threatening, traducing, quarreling, challenging to fight or fighting, or on the public streets, or upon the public highways, or within hearing of such streets or highways uses any vulgar, profane, or indecent language in a loud and boisterous manner will be guilty of disturbance of the peace. So, does it appear as though the elements are satisfied? Yes, because we have here the loud or unusual noise from the music that was being played at Charles's party. We have the tumultuous offensive conduct, which is the loud arguing from Charles and his wife. However, what is missing is what did I do here? What is missing is the, let's get back to this one. What is missing is the willful and the maliciousness that is required. So, sure, the couple was arguing, but they weren't arguing to maliciously or willfully disturb the peace of their neighbors, okay? The facts indicated that Bob and his wife had called the police several times. The police never showed up to their house. The police never told them, hey, listen, you're being loud, your neighbors can't sleep, knock it off. So it's not as though they were put on notice and then they continue to do it. If that were the case, perhaps there would be an argument that what they were doing was willful, but that was not the case. Also, with the son who was playing the loud music, I mean, there really wasn't enough information in the facts for us to say that his actions rose to the level of malicious and willful conduct. It just wasn't there. That conduct is more along the lines, like I said before, of a public nuisance, not the disturbance of the peace that we typically see in criminal proceedings. Now, what would constitute a disturbance of the peace, for example, is if they were arguing with Bob, okay? If they were arguing with each other, that would possibly constitute a disturbance of the peace. If there was some threatening conduct, some fighting words, like, you know, with them saying, I'm gonna beat you up, or I'm gonna do something to inflict bodily harm to you, that would constitute criminal disturbance of the peace. If we had a situation where the neighbor threw something at Bob, that would constitute criminal disturbance of the peace. If we have a situation where some people are in a restaurant and then they start arguing and throwing plates and throwing dishes all over the place and just causing a scene, that would constitute criminal disturbance of the peace, because all of these things are being done maliciously and willfully. Those two things are what are lacking in the fact pattern with respect to the neighbors. So that is why they could not be charged with disturbance of the peace. But overall, I will say that you all understood the concept of the exercise for the most part. Again, I commend some of you for thinking outside of the box and creating things that weren't there. But in the future, try to stick to the fact pattern. Try not to go outside of the fact pattern. And if you are going to venture outside of the fact pattern, then you need to be able to articulate why you're doing so. Because then, if your explanation makes sense and it's logical, you may get the points that you wouldn't have gotten if you didn't articulate what you're doing. And many of you in your introductions indicated that you want to pursue careers in law enforcement. And with that being said, articulation is very important. You're going to be tasked with writing a lot of reports to support decisions that you've made, and you're going to find that it's very important to articulate every single thing that you've done.